people in the village, and you want to hear their thoughts and their ideas. So this would all be part of the research process. Once you've collected the information, you analyze it. So you need to know how this is going to affect the village and the residents, financially or otherwise. The village is constantly facing new challenges, and this would be the approach that I would take to any of those challenges and decisions being made if I was a Board of Trustee member. So in addition to my financial background, I've also volunteered in the village in many ways over the last 2 decades and for a lot of different organizations. I volunteered for GCAA as a coach, Centennials as a coach. I've been involved in the Girl Scouts at St. Joseph's Church. I am both on the parish council and I've been a lector. And of course, I have had various leadership roles for the PTA. The most notable being past president of the PTA. This is a very large responsibility. In our district, our PTA is set up a little differently than a lot of other towns. If you're president, you're actually president of the entire district, all 7 schools and 4,000 students. And there are just hundreds of parent volunteers. There are countless of programs and several fundraising activities that the PTA does every year. For the PTA, I also served as VP of Budget and a member of the high school curriculum committee. One of my other leadership roles was for the Skit Night event. I was able to co-chair the 77th annual event. It's a wonderful thing. It's been a tradition in our town for a long time, but it usually draws close to 600 parents and students combined. So it's a large responsibility. I was also a member of the Tea Committee for the Garden City Schools. And I mention this because it was a very popular event with the seniors in our district, and it was frequently sold out, but a very nice event that was held at the Garden City High School one afternoon, and the seniors were served tea and sandwiches and had a nice program from all of the performing groups from our school district. I have been involved in the CPOA for many years now. I have volunteered on the nominating committee, but also for the Citizens Budget Review and Advisory Committee, also known as CBREC. This committee really sits down at budget time and goes through all the line items of the budget. So I'm somewhat familiar with some of the budget items and things that have been going on for the village from that perspective over the last several years. And I've been very fortunate to be able to attend every single Board of Trustees budget meeting. So I think I've learned a few things from volunteering in this village. And one is that one of our village's greatest assets is the people that live here. I'm always consistently amazed at how many people come out to volunteer and donate their time. So I think that as a trustee, I would look to tap into that amazing resource that we have. There are people with varied skill sets and expertises, and I think it would be great to get people involved, for the betterment of the village. I think I have a proven track record in the village. I hope that people know that when I commit to something, I take it very seriously, and I try to do my absolute best. As a trustee, I think I would try to be transparent in my thought process and try to let residents know, what we're thinking and how we're making decisions for the village. And I'm really open to listening to everybody. And I'm really here to serve you, the residents of the village. And that's kind of the approach that I would take as a member of the Board of Trustees. And with that, I will let Rich introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Yvonne. Just want to clarify one thing. I think maybe you have to post your questions in the Q&A tab. So rather than, I think Judy may have mentioned the chat. So,
apologies, yes.
So if you want to jump into that box at the bottom of your screen. I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and joining us for today's call. I have been living in Garden City for over 20 years. Originally lived in the Mott section of the village, and then I moved to the Estates in 2002. My wife Mary and I recently celebrated 35 years of marriage, and we've raised 3 boys here in Garden City. Most of them have gone through the Garden City schools. One of them's a lawyer. One's living in our basement right now as an investment banker, working, really supposed to be out in San Francisco, but because of COVID, he started his job here in the house. And the other guy just started Boston College and hopes to be a doctor one day. You know, I had the pleasure when the kids were younger to coach them as part of the Garden City Centennials program, and in soccer, of course. And my children also took advantage of all the sports programs, including lacrosse and basketball and the like. And it was they've had a great experience here in Garden City. You know, when we were looking for a home and we were searching back in the 90s, we always kept coming back to Garden City because of so many unique features. It's great schools, sports programs, its own private police force. Everything that we wanted in a village was right here in Garden City. We always kept coming back here, and that's what we decided to raise our family. And so, you know, one of the things I want to do is to make sure that Garden City remains this very unique place on Long Island, probably one of the most sought after communities throughout not only Long Island, but throughout the metropolitan area. Professionally, I graduated from Hofstra, which is from Garden City. I graduated from Hofstra in 1982 with a degree in accounting. And I immediately started working at a firm now today called KPMG, which is one of the big 4 accounting firms. I became a CPA back in '84, and I became an audit partner in 1993. I ended up spending my entire career at KPMG, all 38 years. While I was an audit partner, I led our healthcare and life science group in Metro New York. It was a team of about 80 professionals, and we focused on our go-to-market activities as far as providing services to hospitals, managed care companies, as well as pharmaceutical companies. My last 2 years at KPMG, I spent it in our global office up in Montvale, New Jersey. I was the co-leader of our global audit methodology group. Our group was responsible for coming up with a brand new audit manual, as well as a new audit tool. Both of those items are used by over 50,000 auditors in about 125 countries across the globe. As last year, as I approached retirement, as KPMG has a mandatory retirement age of age 60, I started to contemplate, you know, what I would do in my retirement that started last September. I currently sit on 3 boards. I sit on the board of Farmingdale College Foundation. I sit on the board of New York Bio, which is a biotech trade association, and also the corporate advisory board of the Cold Spring Harbor DNA Learning Center. I'm also serving as a mentor to early stage companies through SUNY Stony Brook as well. So these things are definitely items to keep me busy, but I also look for another opportunity, and I've been closely following the activities within the village and noticed all the significant projects that are ongoing. A lot of them have, you know, significant financial implications. That includes the water remediation, what to do with the firehouse at Edgemere and Stewart Avenue, as far as whether to renovate it or to build a new firehouse. And of course, we have the ongoing issue with St. Paul's and how to resolve that building and what to do with it. And of course, there are other items as finance related within the village, the annual budget process, for example, and there are many, many issues as well. And when I was looking at the current board of trustees for the village, I noticed there were no, you know, accountants or CPAs on the board. And I thought, you know, my background with my many years of experience as a CPA and being an audit partner would complement the other board members and their skill sets as well. So when the opportunity came out to submit my resume to the Estates POA, I went ahead and did that. Did a lot of research, a lot of homework prior to the nomination committee meeting. And I had a very good interview with the 15 members. They asked a lot of good questions, and we had a lot of good dialogue about, you know, the future of Garden City and some of the issues that the village is facing now and what they'll face in the future. So I was very happy to be selected as the candidate. It would be truly an honor and a privilege to serve as a village trustee. My only objective is to do what's in the best interest of the village. And that would be my objective. Overall, my philosophy as far as how I make decisions, through my long accounting career, and also how I make decisions when I sit on the various boards, is to really listen to everybody's opinion, not jump to any rash conclusions, and try to come to the best possible solution after taking everybody's point of view into consideration. And that's the collaborative approach that I would bring, to the village board, and that would be my objective. So with that, I'll turn it over to Judy, and we'll start with the questions.
Great. So we'll start right in with some questions, and thanks. We've gotten a couple already. So for those of you, again, as a reminder, put your questions into the Q&A and we'll answer them as they come in. We did get a question about finance, and probably based on your background. So the question is, you're both finance professionals. What is your opinion of the village's finances, and what plans do you have to improve the village operations? And that's for either of you.
Maybe I'll take the first part of that, Rich.
Mhm.
Having sat on CBREC, I have looked at the budget for several years, and I've sat through these meetings, and I really feel that the village is very conscientious about trying to keep costs down. And as you all may know, we have a AAA Moody's rating, which is excellent. And I guess that it's hard to know what that actually means, but I know somebody recently was upset about the village selling bonds at a premium. And this is the advantage that it allows the village to actually get more money than they expected, but by being able to sell bonds at a premium. And I think this individual didn't understand what that actually meant. But it just means that we can raise money at a good rate. And I do think that when you go through all these line items, like I said, that the discussions at the budget meetings are very thorough. And I think that we've really done a good job of keeping our tax increases below 2% and doing the best job that they can.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I've read the financial statements. I've gone through the budgets. I've also have experience with working with governmental agencies. I served as the audit partner on New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation, and also Nassau University Medical Center. So I'm familiar with the differences between government standards and generally accepted standards, and there are quite a bit of nuances to it. I would just say, upon reviewing the financial statements, it's clear that the village has a very strong balance sheet. They have a good track record of meeting their budget, no significant overruns. It is remarkable how successful they've been as far as keeping the increases underneath the 2% cap. That's a very significant challenge given the nature of governments. It's basically a service business where most of the cost is salaries and fringe benefits. So I think it's been a remarkable job. They have a very reasonable size fund balance that I think Moody's takes into consideration when they do their bond ratings. And very recently, they were reaffirmed the AAA rating, which is the highest rating you can have from Moody's. So I think overall, the village is very strong. The debt service level, as far as principal interest, is a relatively modest number. So I think overall, the village is in good shape. That being said, there will always be challenges coming ahead. It's always a challenge to keep that budget as is. And I think there's also with the new normal as we come out of COVID, and we're not sure exactly where the economy is going to be. We were just talking before the call about how New York City does not yet seem to have a lot of vibrance of people coming back to the city, and what will that mean to our overall economy and how that might impact Garden City down the road. That's something we'll have to keep our eye on as we progress forward.
Okay.
And as far as improving, one of the thoughts that we do have the CBREC committee. I just wanted to add that, all organizations right now are looking for ways to improve their operations. And I think COVID in particular has really shown the light of the importance of technology and to digitize your operations to the extent possible. I know when I was at KPMG, this has become a big focus of a lot of our clients as well. So I think there will be opportunities. I think the board has done a good job of reducing its headcount to over the years, but I think we have to look at other opportunities to continue to become as efficient as possible, and also to find ways to enhance the quality of our services, not always looking to reduce costs, but enhance the quality of what we deliver to our residents, as well as try to find more cost-effective ways of doing it. So I think that'll be a focus of both Yvonne and myself going, if we were to be selected or elected, I should say, to the board.
Great, thank you. In the spirit of trying to keep on similar topics at the same time, I will say we got a question about the Garden City News ad on firefighters. I'm going to hold on that just for 1 second. We'll come back to it in just a second. But we did get twice the question, when was the last time that Garden City had a bond rating below AAA?
That I don't have the details. It seems it's been like AAA for a while. So I don't know, Yvonne, if you know.
I don't know the answer to that question offhand.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say you can look into that and maybe post it on the Community Agreement Party website as specific information once we find out?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
But the good news, of course, is that we're AAA now, and that's probably the most important thing, which is good.
Great, thank you. This question is to either of you. You placed an ad in the Garden City News stating as fact that if paid firefighters were hired, there's a high risk that the volunteer force would quit. Were you told this by a leader of the volunteer force that they would quit in such a scenario? And how would you as a trustee handle similar threats by volunteer firefighters if they don't get their way? And that was for both of you.
Yeah, I'll take that ad. It was probably one of our first ads that we put out in this campaign. It was in response to a suggestion by the mayor candidate for the opposition that thought that he would consider adding 5 or 6 paid firefighters to supplement our volunteers. Based on what happened over the past 2.5 years ago, when the village went through a very difficult episode of, moving away from a combined firefighting force and not to have a combination of union firefighters and volunteers, because there were many issues associated with that model. There was arbitration, there was work disputes. When they looked at the rest of Long Island, as far as whether other villages, not just Long Island, but throughout New York State, whether they had paid firefighters, the answer was that for most villages, with few exceptions across the state, most go strictly with the volunteers. So the board made a tough decision, a difficult decision at the time, was debated as far as whether or not to move forward with a fully volunteer fire department, and that's what the village did. And there's been obviously benefits to that, since that happened. So the position of the candidates was that to bring back the concept of bringing back paid firefighters would bring a lot of issues associated with that decision. And we did not think it was the best decision for the village. I think it's been confirmed that shortly after this ad appeared, the mayor candidate said he reflected and he changed his mind, and he now fully supports a volunteer firefighting force as well. So now we're both on the same page. So I think our ad was effective as far as getting the message out, as far as the concerns with going back to a hybrid model or a combined model. And I think that's success. Our volunteer firefighters are dedicated to the village. I give them so much credit. They wake up in the middle of the night to answer calls. They do a tremendous amount of training. I have tremendous respect for our volunteer firefighters. Firefighting in my family, my father-in-law was a firefighter in the city, as well as my brother-in-law. I realized the dedication and the danger that these people put in every single day. So I think the ads served its purpose. It identified a proposal that was not going to be viable, and I think at this point, both sides are on the same page.
Okay, Yvonne, anything to add?
I just want to say that I do support a volunteer, firefighters in our village. I think that most villages on Long Island actually have volunteer forces. So.
Mm-hmm. So, and just to continue with that question, then we'll go on to the next one in just a moment. But I believe there was also a piece of the question about the commentary in the ad that the volunteer force might quit if there were a scenario where paid firefighters came back, and whether or not, or how would you as a trustee handle similar threats if that happened?
I think, the ad, if you read through the various points in the ad, it was talking about the reasons why we really switched to a fully volunteer. There was concerns that if you bring back a paid firefighters, and we bring back all the issues that we had with the paid firefighters, that we were going to have difficulties as far as with the volunteers, and there could be challenges to the volunteers. So there was some commentary about, we had concerns that if you bring this back and we bring back all the issues that happened when we had a combined firefighter force, we would have difficulty, retaining our volunteers. We would have difficulty attracting volunteers. So there was no threats from the volunteers that they were going to leave in mass. The message that we were trying to say, it wasn't working back then. We didn't believe it would work in the future. And at the end of the day, their mayor candidate also reflected and came to the same conclusion, that it is not something that we should go back with. We should stay the course. I don't think most residents realize there's only about 3 to 4 fires each year in Garden City. And when there is a fire in Garden City, the surrounding firefighters all react to that. They all cover each other because fires are relatively rare. Thank goodness for us that we live in a time in the world where number of fires have gone down a lot. And that's for a lot of reasons, including technologies and smoke detectors and just overall enhancements in the safeties of the houses that we live in. So I think the key message is that this whole thing with the firefighters was a bad idea, and I guess the other candidate has realized it was a bad idea, so I think it was an effective ad to get that message. So I think that's all I can really say about it.
So sticking with that theme, a couple more things. So question is, Rich, you mentioned that the village has benefited from the firing of career firefighters. Can you please reflect on what those benefits specifically are?
I think the benefits is that, our firefighters, they meet the challenge of all the calls within the village. The volunteer group has grown over time. It's close to 100 volunteers at this point in time. There are benefits as far as, to some extent, there's benefits as far as cost. We don't have those employees currently on the payroll. Obviously, the firefighters that were here, there was a settlement as far as, their severance and the like that was taken care of a couple of years ago. But, right now, everything that I'm hearing is that the fire situation is working, that our dedicated volunteers are getting the job done, and they're protecting the village. So it seems to be working at this point in time.
And we'll have one more, I think, on the fire department. Then there are some other topics coming up as well. This question reads, could you please answer who said the firefighters were going to quit?
Who said it was a collective feeling that if we brought back this combined fire force, that we would have difficulty, potentially, having volunteers either leave or not wanting to stay. There was no one sent us a letter saying. It was our position that we thought that there was a significant risk of the volunteers leaving the force or not wanting to stay. I'm sure a lot of volunteers would have stayed if we brought back, but it's kind of a moot point at this point, because the key message is that it was a bad idea that was suggested by the other candidate. This candidate realized it was a bad idea, and he's changed his mind. So I think at the end of the day, the ad accomplished the goal. It made everybody aware of the importance of staying with our volunteer firefighting the way we're doing it right now, as far as going back and revisiting having a combined firefighter force. That's the best I can say about it.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of questions, and we'll come back to that topic because there may be some that come up in a few minutes, which is great, but we're going to switch a little bit in terms of topics. The next question reads, the November 16th, 2020 communication from the current board addressed many issues facing the village. Number 7 says adverse tax base mix shift and discusses rezoning the commercial area on Franklin Avenue from commercial to include mixed use retail and apartments. Do you support rezoning to add apartments on Franklin Avenue? And that was obviously to both of you.
I would have to say that before I make a decision on whether or not we're going to rezone, I would like to have some more information on what the impact would be. Clearly, they're talking about the taxes, and it seems like they want to figure out whether rezoning could benefit the tax base for the village. So I think that I don't want to give a yes or no to an issue that I haven't fully vetted.
Right. I would only add that, they are changes. We are entering a new normal post-COVID. I think we want our Franklin Avenue, our 7th Street, our New Hyde Park Road, those business districts to be vibrant. We want them to be filled with tenants and to have their tax base say solid. I think it's too early to say, whether we should start, potentially rezoning. We should always consider it. But I think more importantly, let's see what evolves over time. Let's see. We have, for example, the Sears building. I believe NYU, Long Island, or the former Winthrop is going to open up a medical facility there. There may be opportunities to reposition Lord and Taylor as maybe another healthcare facility, or perhaps it could be reconstructed as an office building. I think it's a little too soon to say. I would prefer that our business district remains vibrant with a strong commercial base down the road. But everything would be reviewed, long term, including potential for rezoning.
Okay. And actually, the next question sticks with that theme, which is great. Question is, thanks very much for the update. In such a safe town, the majority of crime data entails traffic issues. I'll read you the first question. There's a follow-up second question. The first question is, what do you think of speculation regarding shutting 7th Street to through traffic and making a more insulated zone for pedestrian shoppers?
I'll start and pass off to you, Rich. I think that anytime you're going to consider a major traffic change like that, you also have to consider how it's going to impact the other streets surrounding that area. And I know that our village is facing a lot of traffic issues just because of the increase in cars that are coming through the village. I know that apps like Waze are sending cars different ways through the village. The CPOA has done a lot of work on a road diet that they've talked about for Cathedral to try to slow the traffic in that area because of the number of accidents that they've been having on 4th Street and Cathedral. And I think it's an interesting idea, something that needs to be, like I said, explored again. But with COVID and more restaurants being outside and tables being outside, I think it's definitely something to look into.
Yeah, I definitely love our Friday nights when during the summer, and the extended Friday nights that we had when or the weekends when we closed 7th Street. I think it was great for businesses and the like. I think it's something to consider. It has a lot of challenges to close it permanently. We'd have to, like Yvonne said, what's the impact to the other streets, and what would happen to the diverted traffic? What would it mean to the businesses that are on 7th Street? Obviously, we want to keep their businesses very vibrant. Would it impact them negatively? It's kind of a nice idea to think about. I definitely would want to consider it.
Okay. And the second question on a similar but not 7th Street topic, would you consider a green arrow going south on Nassau Boulevard, turning left onto Stewart? That left turn seems dangerous as it's impossible to see across when other cars opposite you are trying to make the left-hand turn as well. So a green arrow going south on Nassau Boulevard to Stewart.
Okay.
A green arrow going, isn't there one?
Go ahead, Rich.
Sure, I'm not sure there is. I don't live that far from there either. I should know. But I'm a big fan of green arrows. I think the more we can do to make the roads more safe, I'm a fan of that. I think it might be a county road, so maybe it's something that our traffic commission could look at and make a recommendation to Nassau County, but that's definitely something that we should think about. And also look at, I think it was a bad accident there not long ago, I believe, about a month or so ago. So that is definitely something to look at.
Okay. Let's see, our next question, a little bit, as I said, of a different topic. For both of you, you both have impressive backgrounds. As potential first-time trustees, please share your views on how your experiences and, quote, governing philosophies would be beneficial to the village compared to the FABGC candidates. Wait, where did it go? They have GC candidates who, if elected, would take office with little experience at the POA or village-wide committee level.
Well, I think having been involved in the POAs for a while now, I have a general feel for how the government works. I know what committees we have that are out there, and how to, we have a traffic committee, we have CBREC, we have an environmental advisory board, we have architectural review, we have a library committee, we have a recreational committee. So I'm, aware of these committees. I've been to some of the meetings, and I think that I also, as I spoke about earlier, about some of my decision-making processes and how I would look at any decisions I'd be making as a Board of Trustee member. But I also think we bring some fresh ideas, Rich and I, a fresh perspective. I think that we're both open to listening to residents and hearing what they have to say. I think that's a big part of maybe why we've gotten involved in the first place, to try to get more, I think, transparency. I think we can do a better job of trying to get information out to residents in the village. I'm always surprised at how little people know about our government and how it's set up. I had somebody, a couple people actually, tell me they thought that we had a paid mayor. We are all volunteers. And, those are some of the things that I think we can bring. Rich?
Right. Yeah, I did not come through the traditional way of the POAs. I've been to POA meetings over the years, but I was more of a resident of the estates, and I submitted my resume when they asked for people that were interested in running for trustee. My rationale for running for trustee is I felt that a lot of the issues that we have in the village were financial related. And there's going to be a lot of considerations as far as dollar amounts, what to spend, what not to spend. What are the pros and cons of these various projects? So, my goal was to bring that skill set to the board of directors to complement the other trustees. That was always my philosophy. And as far as the approach, as far as just the nature of the way, maybe a mild-mannered CPA, I would like to listen to people. I like to hear their thoughts and views. I look forward to, when a resident steps up to a mic at a board meeting, I have a lot of respect, because it takes a lot of courage to be willing to stand up in front of a large group of people, get up in front of a microphone and make a comment. So I can't wait for the day, if I am elected, to be on the other side and to listen to the residents come to the mic and explain their concerns, and listen, and then get back to those residents if we can, and explain what we can and cannot do. But I'm looking forward to doing things like that to enhance our communications with the residents. One of the suggestions that I've had is to have Zoom town hall meetings, or hopefully in-person meetings one day, where we try to break down the barriers between the board of trustees and administration, and really make the residents more aware of what's going on at the village as far as their local government. And that could be a situation where the administrator, the mayor, the deputy mayor talk about all the key projects and give everybody a quick update, a 5 to 10 minute update, where we stand with the water situation. Where do we stand with St. Paul's? What's the next step with St. Paul's? Where do we stand with the firehouse decision, as far as what's going to be the resolution there? And I would also like potentially have a reception afterwards, where the residents that are interested in their local government can meet afterwards, perhaps have local restaurants cater it, perhaps, or showcase some of our local residents, but just have an interaction, so the residents can meet our board members, they can meet our administrators, and of course, they can meet each other. I think that would be a good step forward to enhancing our communications.
I'm going to add one more thing. I think that we could make our website for the village a little more interactive and update it. I know people have also given me feedback that they say sometimes it's hard to find things on our website. So I think an update there would be good. And I do think Rich's ideas of trying to have additional communication with residents outside of the board meetings is a really good idea. I've been to many board meetings and it's always a handful full of people there. So I think, how do you get the message out to people if they're not, coming to board meetings? So I think it may be a different forum where you don't have so many things going on. A board meeting, you have a very long agenda. Sometimes it's hard to take questions uh, from everybody, or longer statements from people because the agenda's lengthy. So I think offering an alternative for topics that really need more time is a great idea.
So I have a couple of questions that may be repetitive to what you just said, but I don't want to skip over them. So if it is repetitive, just obviously share that with the group. The first is, if you get elected, do you have specific ideas on how to take different viewpoints from community members into account during board deliberations and decision-making, especially for major items like the firehouse or St. Paul's, but also for less visible community concerns? So some of that you've just alluded to. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I do think that forming additional committees is a great way to get residents involved and have more opinions and input on some of these larger decisions that the village is going to be making. Even with the firehouse, I'll just say that, no decision has been made as of yet. They're waiting for, PKAD to come back with a proposal. But after that, depending on what they come back with, yeah, get small committees of people together to discuss certain aspects of it, perhaps. With St. Paul's too, that's a very large project, and creating multiple committees with experts from different areas, construction or architecture, I think would really be great and a good way to move some of these things forward.
Yeah, I think it's important. The POA process itself is meant to have outreach. The trustees for their particular section attend the POA meetings, and they're there to give an update at the monthly POA meetings, and also to get feedback in as well, as far as on the ground concerns of our residents. I think that process needs to perhaps be more robust, perhaps, or we need to encourage more people to come out to the POAs to listen to their local two trustees from their section of the village, because that's a great way to get various input, whether it's a suggestion for a traffic light, as far as a turning arrow. I mean, that type of information is a good avenue. One of the other suggestions, I'm relatively big into technology. I think, in addition to having a revamped website, like Yvonne mentioned, would be very helpful, but even a mobile app would be helpful. I've found another village that has an app where you can just click on it, and it has immediately a button you can press if you want to express a concern you have. No matter what, obviously it's not for 911 issues, but if you have a concern about a light or a small issue or a pothole or anything, I think there are ways that we can better engage with technology as far as getting these issues from our residents and getting it into the village so we can respond to those and take action as appropriate.
Okay. So next question says, I would like each of the candidates to give their thoughts on the handful of issues that caused enough concern to give rise to another party to challenge the usual leadership process.
Well, I mean, as far as the issues that have, there's been a number of issues. Obviously, I think it all started with the Garden City Casino, with the delayed extension of the lease, the renewal of the long-term lease. They've had a number of short-term extensions. I think the good news on the casino, obviously, that seems to like it's making good progress at this point in time. Obviously, Yvonne and I are not, we're not part of that process. We're candidates. We're outside of the board right now, but hopefully that issue can be resolved in short order. Hopefully by the summer, one would hope. As far as the other issue that it really has resulted in, I guess, the opposition coming about was the concerns over the polls. Obviously, we have some very concerned residents about the very tall utility poles that came about by the MTA that was installed along the train. That's a very unfortunate situation. There was a lot of discussion among the board as far as how to progress. I know those residents feel that more could have been done for them, and they're still very concerned and upset about what transpired along the poles. That did lead to the split decision to pursue litigation. And that lawsuit was filed about, I think it's about 2 weeks ago now, against the MTA and also the Long Island Railroad and other parties as well. I think Yvonne and I, if elected, on that particular topic, I think our first priority will be to sit down with outside counsel and get a debriefing as far as, what the status of the case is and what the potential avenues going forward are, for the village, and try to find, at the end of the day, we all want to find the best possible solution for those residents. We want to see what can be done, legally, as far as getting the MTA and the Long Island Railroad to do something. And then, of course, we have to start to get the vegetation replanted. We have to get the landscaping put in place, regardless of what happens to the poles. That we have to aggressively pursue that, in 2021. Start to bring things back to normal along that part of Garden City.
Yeah. I know they want to hear from both of us. I agree with Rich in that it seems that the casino issue prompted this group to get together. And I would just say that I was part of the committee at the casino that was trying to move the agreement forward. So I fully support an agreement with the village and the casino. In regard to the polls, yes, it's a very unfortunate issue, but like Rich said, I think you're going to have to balance the cost of a lawsuit going forward with the benefit. I am glad that they voted to move forward with the lawsuit. It was a 5-4 vote by the board, with the mayor, breaking the tie. And I just think that you need to push back a little bit in the hopes that people will think twice about doing this to Garden City in the future. But right now it may be just a mean, I guess maybe the focus now should really be on the plantings and any vegetation that we might be able to put in to try to help make it a little more aesthetically pleasing over there for the residents.
Okay, thank you. We do have a few questions again on the fire department, but let me put them, just so everybody knows, I'm going to put them on the side for a minute because we have a lot of questions coming in and they are on all different topics. So I want to make sure we cover, we'll get to everything, but I want to make sure we cover topics that other people are sending in as well. The next question said, have either, or you two, these two it says, but have either of you spoken to current trustees Bolbrook, Heyer, or Macrinos about what they decided on the Garden City News, and how do you feel about it?
As far as the Garden City News issue with, whether they were the paper of record, I think that was the issue a while ago. I can only say that I'm a fan of the Garden City News. I've been reading it since before I moved to Garden City. When I was looking for houses, I would come into the village and I would get a copy of it. And I've subscribed to the Garden City News since I've been a resident of Garden City. So I think the Garden City News, I think it's great. I think we're very fortunate. Not many villages and towns have such a robust newspaper. You look at other towns, they don't have such great coverage. It's something I look forward to every Friday. So I will always be a supporter of the Garden City News. I think it's great. I think they have a great reporter, Ricky Masson, I believe. I won't get his name wrong, but I think he does a great job covering all the activities of the village. And I think we're blessed to have that paper. So that's all.
No, I agree with you, Rich. I'm a big fan of the Garden City News. Been in the paper a lot over my lifetime in Garden City. And they ended up making 2 official papers of the village at the end of the day, the Board of Trustees, but Rich and I were not involved in that. We had nothing to do with it. Like I said, I think we're both fans of the paper.
Okay. Here's a question again for both of you. Have there been any decisions that the current Board of Trustees has made that either of you have disagreed with?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
If we had a prize, you would get it.
Yeah. I will say that I think that the Board of Trustees have made decisions that people in the village don't always fully understand. I think that they haven't really given their whole thought process behind certain decisions they've made. And I know when I read the sound bites in the newspaper, sometimes, you know, my eyes go up and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this. And then I talk to somebody or I go to a board meeting and they explain sort of the backstory with it and more of the thought process. And I've gone, oh, okay, you know, maybe that makes some sense. So I don't know if there's one thing that comes to mind that, you know, I'm in disagreement with, but I do feel that once I've heard a more detailed explanation, some of the decisions make more sense.
Yeah, I think that's true. One thing I've learned, you know, since this process started and I submitted my name, that it is complicated, you know, that there are a lot of factors that have to be weighed as far as making these decisions. There's cost considerations, there's legal considerations. You know, I give the volunteers that serve on the board credit for the amount of time that they have to put in order to make the decisions they make. Are they 100% perfect? I don't think any organization is 100% perfect, including my, you know, my former firm, whether any client that I served on, you know, all of us, if anybody's in business knows that organizations, they have their best interests and they want to do the right thing. But sometimes things don't work out. And sometimes you have to take corrective action. You have to acknowledge the fact that even though you thought this was the best decision, it didn't work out and we have to take corrective action. So I think that's just the nature of any organization. But I believe all the board members are trying. I think they recognize that they, as Yvonne alluded to, maybe they have to do a better job explaining how they're coming to their decisions and why they came to their decisions. And I think all of the candidates, all five of us, realize that we have to, that we're going to do a much better job communicating if we're to get elected to the residents.
And just one more thing I'd add, as Rich was saying, when you have a village of 22,000 people, not everyone is going to agree with every decision you make. You know, you try to do your best, but you know, people have different opinions.
So I'm going to combine the next two questions because I think they're more about a general approach that either of you might take to the trustee role. And then we do have several questions coming in on St. Paul, so we'll get to that in just a second. The first question is, if you're elected and something like the monster poles being moved to our side of the tracks gets put on your plate, will you both take time to talk to neighbors that are directly impacted by the decision? The second question says, the two of you would make great trustees. Rich, it seems like you have the most financial experience of any trustee on the board. Good luck. The current board seems to have a reputation of being rude to residents and disrespectful, not the best culture. Seems like the board needs a new look. You are only two. How will you both be able to get the rest of the board to be more resident friendly and respectful? So, you know, the first is more, I think, about listening to the neighbors, and the polls was the example, and the second talks about the board as a whole, but to me, probably similar topics, and that was to both of you.
Okay. Maybe just on the polls, I think that Rich and I's approach would be to try to anticipate what some of the future problems are going to be in the village. The polls are hard because I feel like once they went in, it's really hard to get them removed again. But I think our thoroughness and forward-looking thinking will hopefully kind of prevent those things from happening in the first place, perhaps. We will certainly try. And then absolutely listen to residents and see what they have to say. I think that's one of the things that both of us does well. And I said I didn't know Rich before I started this process several weeks ago, but he's definitely a very thoughtful guy and a guy that's going to listen to people.
Thanks, Yvonne, for that comment. Appreciate it. You know, look, I think the two of us could make a difference. But I think also the other candidates that we're running with, you know, Mark and Bob and Steve, I think they understand that things have to be different going forward, and that things have to change as far as what goes on at the board meetings. I don't think, and I've attended a number of meetings recently, and I think they're trying to, be responsive when people come up at that, at the end of the meeting to have their 4 minutes. I think they're working at it. And I think all of us have to do a better job as far as communicating. I think we can make an impact there. I don't think there'll be, if I have my way, there'll be no rudeness ever. I never want a situation where someone feels that we were rude to any resident. The residents, they pay our taxes. They're the ones that decide, they drive the whole village, and we always have to respect the residents. And that would always be my philosophy. I will never let anybody be rude to a resident in any setting.
Well, I wouldn't either. We're here to work hard for the residents.
Yeah.
We represent you. So I feel like if we're on the board of trustees, I want to say it's almost our job to listen to you.
So here's a quick question and then we'll get to St. Paul's. Part of the budget process in the past was a bus tour of village facilities. Last time it was done was Mayor Episcopia when he was in office. We thought it was fun and a great way to show the various village departments. Would you support a restoration of the budget bus tour? I will say I went on many of them and it was very fun.
I think it's a great idea.
It was great, yeah.
So.
I think it's great. I'm not sure in our COVID environment how to do that, but hopefully COVID is moving behind us and maybe we can bring that back for you.
Good. Okay, so let's move to St. Paul's. And as I said, I'll try to combine where I can. Questions about specifically, what are your plans for St. Paul's? And when can this facility, or when will this facility serve our community? You're both well acquainted with St. Paul's $8 million purchase price, 6 to 7 million spent on consultants and maintenance, and no viable decision as to demolition or question mark. The main entrance floor recently collapsed. What are the candidates' gut feelings on St. Paul's? Is it time for demolition or more consultants? And I thought there was one more question. I think those are all right, that's it on St. Paul's, but you get the drift.
Okay. St. Paul's has been an issue in the village for almost 30 years now. And it's not going to be it's obviously not an easy decision. If it was something would have been done already. I do think that it's a good thing that the Board of Trustees has taken the first step in terms of remediation of the building, because it's my understanding that no matter what you do with the site, that that needs to be done first. And then I think it's going to be important to get committees together to, again, get ideas from residents and work through different scenarios for the building longer term. It's a big project and it's going to need a lot of hands.
Yeah, I would, being a lover of history and a lover of the history of Garden City in particular, being a planned community. Actually, I'm reading a book on A.T. Stewart recently, and I was kind of inspirational because he was 70 years old when he actually decided he was going to build Garden City. So there's still time for me to do something spectacular like that. But I was very impressed to read his background. It is part of our history. I think there's a love of the building for a lot of residents. I think every resident, the majority of the residents, I think if we had a very financially feasible solution, some sort of reuse of the building that the village can enjoy, that would improve our property values, and that we would look at and be a sense of pride of our history. I think most residents want that. The challenge, of course, is how much is it going to cost? What would be the impact on our taxes because of the debt service to do that adaptive reuse? And then what goes into the building? What will it cost, the operating costs associated with that? And I always tell people that if it's only going to cost $100 a year and we could do something incredible in the building, whether it's a STEAM center or whether it's a recreational center, and it wasn't going to add a tremendous burden to people, I think everyone would sign up, I think, for $100 a year. But unfortunately, we don't know what that number is. We don't know if it's $1,000 a year. We don't know if it's whatever the number might be. And that's really the next step. And I think the good news is that there was some momentum here to stabilize the building, to hire consultants to help us think about how we would do community outreach to get ideas. Obviously, a lot of that got put on hold with COVID, but hopefully once we get our vaccines, hopefully we can start that outreach and that we can start engaging residents to try to come up with that one idea that we've been looking for 30 years and try to come to a solution that could really be something great for the village and affordable for the residents. And I think that's important. Now, some people, I've spoken to a lot of people, some people say that's crazy. We have to demolish the building. I think we owe it to Mr. Stewart, we owe it to our history to try to find a way to see if we can get to an adaptive reuse. But we will always listen to the will of the residents at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I will say that I think Rich and I both agree that if the final decision is made, it should be made by the residents by referendum.
Okay. We have a couple of questions, different topic on, and where did they just go? On the open meeting laws and how that works with the Board of Trustees. So the first says, we both pledge not to participate in quote, secret meetings of the Board of Trustees that violate the New York State open meeting laws. The second, let me scroll down. The second is directed, Yvonne, to you and says, Yvonne, how do you hear the detailed explanation when most decisions are made behind closed doors in executive session without any explanation?
I'll start off first, and then since Yvonne's got the second part. Look, open meeting laws is the law of the land. It's the law of New York State. And I'm a big, I'm a CPA. I want to keep my CPA license. I believe in following the law, and of course, we'll follow the open meetings law. And that beyond the open meeting law itself, I mean, there are situations, and I think there was a letter from the current trustees that were describing when they go into executive session, right? They go into executive session for litigation, when they're getting advice from counsel, when they have a personnel matter, things of that nature. That's when they're supposed to go into executive session. That's acceptable under the open meetings law. But beyond the law itself is transparency, is openness, and letting the residents know exactly what decisions are being made and why those decisions are being made. And I think it's up to every government official, every village trustee to try to make sure we have maximum transparency in everything we do. So we never have people thinking that there are secret meetings at all. So that's basically a core responsibility of a village trustee.
Yes, I agree with Rich. I mean, you have to abide by the law. So I don't think either of us plan to be having secret meetings. And the second part of that question is really, I've attended Board of Trustees meetings where they do talk sometimes, more in depth about why the decisions were made. And I talk to other people in the village, and I really attend my CPOA meeting because I find that it's a great opportunity for the trustees who attend the CPOA meeting to answer questions from the residents. And it's an opportunity for them to give more of an explanation about what's going on. And I really feel that attending the CPOA meetings and listening to Louis and Teresa has given me a lot more insight into some of the decisions.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on. There are a few questions about the third track project, the polls, etc. So if it's all right with both of you, I'll go through all of those questions and then we'll come back to them, make sure everything gets answered. The first says, I think we can all agree that the third track project has been a disaster for residents in the surrounding areas and the existing BOT was slow in responding to the problems. Based on what you know about the situation, how would you have handled it differently? And how will you handle it going forward if you are elected to the board? Similar question, Steve Macrinos gave permission to put the monster poles on the south side of the tracks in September 2019, as stated in their April 8th, 2020 letter to the MTA. Do you agree with that? And Yvonne, the comment about the monster poles being in the best interest for I'm sorry, I'm reading this wrong. The comment about the monster poles is in the best interest for Garden City. Aside from anticipating issues if they arise, then should be confronted head on. Why would you not address a GC issue regardless of whether it can be resolved in GC's favor? So let's hold off on that one. I thought that was more poll related. So we'll come back to that if that's okay. But the question really on the polls is like, how would you handle it going forward? or how would you have handled it differently looking back? And then did you agree with the apparent signature from Steve Macrinos about allowing the poles to be moved to the south side of the tracks?
Okay, I thought we addressed a little bit about how we thought we would handle the polls going forward.
Yeah, it's a little hard for us to say, trying to like second guess, what happened in the last 2 years when we were not on the board. And so I think the three trustees on Thursday, I think would be in the best position to talk about, what transpired as far as the polls and the back and forth and their efforts to try to get changes. Obviously, they tried. They tried to reach out to politicians. They tried to reach out to the MTA. They were unsuccessful. They debated whether to go to litigation or not. That led to the split decision, like Yvonne said, 5-4. I think they're in a better position to describe, the step-by-step that happened over the last 2 years. As far as what we can do going forward, it's to meet the council right away. And it's to the extent we can keep the residents aware of the affected residents, how that litigation is going. Obviously, we have to preserve attorney-client privilege, but I would like, if they would like an opportunity to have some outreach to those residents that keep them in the loop as far as how the litigation is progressing. Because at this point, the best solution is to get as much as we can out of the lawsuit, whatever that the law tells us we can do, and whatever the opposite party is willing to settle on. But we got to work on getting the vegetation back. We got to work on getting the trees in place to try to bring some greenery to that section and try to bring it back to where it was before this whole construction started, unfortunately. But that's the best. We got to look, from our perspective, we can only look forward. So.
Thank you.
I agree. And there was a second part of that question, Judy, that I was trying to understand.
There is. So let me read it exactly out how it's written, and hopefully we'll be able to understand. So it may be my reading of it. For Yvonne, the comment about the monster poles is in the best interest for Garden City. Aside from anticipating issues, if they arise, then they should be confronted head on. Why would you not address a GC issue regardless of whether it can be resolved in GC's favor?
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not in favor of the monster polls at all. That question seemed to indicate I am. I'm not in favor of having monster polls. And all I was saying is that we would try to anticipate events that might negatively impact Garden City in the future, and try to be, a little ahead of them and reach out to people and try to, I guess, prevent something like this potentially from happening in the future. So I don't know if that answers.
All right, if not, maybe the poster can put another question back in. We'll try to get back to that and be more specific there. So switching topics a little bit, question, and I want to be respectful of people's time. We obviously, as we said, we'll keep going. We do have questions remaining, but hopefully we'll get to yours as well. Please share your plans on specific processes for the water treatment in Garden City.
Yvonne, you want to
Go ahead, Rich. I was just going to say that the village put out a very comprehensive, glossy pamphlet or flyer that explained what they were trying to do to clean up our water. I think that the water issue is probably one of the most important with people in the village. So I hope that you will read this and see what they had to say. But in terms of, what we're going to do, we would follow the experts' advice in what's best to try to clean up our water.
Yeah, that was one of the first issues that got my attention last year when I was thinking about running. I saw how big the project was for the water. It's a little over $40 million. And, water is paramount to our safety, right? Everyone wants, as good a water as possible for their family, bathing, showering, cooking pasta, drinking from. From all my reading, and I've read quite a bit about the dioxin and the PFOS and the PFOA, These were new rules. These are new MCLs, or minimum contaminant levels, that were put into place by New York State. It's been being discussed for the past couple of years, and it was put into place last year in 2020. Everything I've seen, the village has been very progressive and very proactive as far as following what these new limits were going to be. They engaged with H2M to get the equipment that would be appropriate to remove these chemicals from our water in order to get under the MCL, the new MCLs that have been established by the state. And keep in mind that many states don't have, New York State was the first in the country to put in an MCL for 1,4-dioxin. Other states don't have it, for example. I believe a few others now have it today. I think the village is doing everything they can to get under these new regulations with the equipment. They're making the investment. They're moving as quickly as possible. They have to put this equipment on 10 of our wells, all of our wells. So it's a very significant project. So I think from our perspective, the number one is let's get it done as quickly as possible. I think the village said they think they're on track to get it done within the next 6 months. They were actually, the state actually gave them until, I believe it was October 2021 to get it done. And that was the original deadline. You read that we got a deferral to May 2022, but that was just in case there's any delays in getting the 10 wells up and running. But I think that, the village is doing everything they can. The New York State Department of Health is monitoring this. They feel the water is still safe to drink at this point. Keep in mind the MCLs are set much lower than, the animal studies that talk about, potential risk. And if you read it, it's on the website. You can go on New York State's website. I think, the village is doing as quickly as they can to address this new regulation. And I think we should be proud that they've done what they've done. Another side issue on this is that the state has promised all water districts that they will reimburse 60% of the cost. The village has gotten approval for about $9 million of the cost. The state is supposed to open up their granting process, and we have to follow up. I think it's another 16 million of cost, so we can get 60% of our capital costs reimbursed to us. So we really, over time, only have to fund with debt, the net amount of 40% of the cost. So I think that's a big number. That's one of my priorities as an accountant, is to make sure that we collect that money for the village and for the residents.
Okay, so we have lots more questions, and I think we'll kind of jump a little bit between topics, if that's okay with everyone. Next question asks, and this goes back to the conversation about 7th Street and potentially closing off 7th Street. If we made 7th Street into a pedestrian mall, how would we handle the handicap parking issue?
It's a good question. It would need some research.
Yeah, I think pedestrian mall would be an interesting idea. There's going to be a lot of aspects of putting a pedestrian mall, and handicap parking would be right up there with one of the issues that we'd look at. So,
okay.
But
this one, I think you've answered to some degree, but I don't want to miss it. How do you propose to, quote, educate residents? How do you propose to educate residents on the wisdom of village board decisions that appear to casual observers to be misguided? Some of that you've covered already, I know, but maybe just to any new ideas there.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about the website. I think that the website can be a better way for people to go back and read about, what decisions were made and how they were made. Like I said, I think part of the issue is you don't have a lot of people that show up to Board of Trustee meetings. So the challenge is, how do you reach out to those people, and what medium do you use to keep them informed? And I think we'll have to look into several different things, but whether it's social media, whether it's, like I said, a website, Zoom calls, we've talked about potentially doing that, where residents can just ask any question they want, town halls. So all those means of reaching out.
yeah. I think we should look at all different opportunities. We, in addition to having a semi-annual town hall that I mentioned before and that Yvonne alluded to, we're also thinking of an idea of maybe having just monthly calls with residents. It's just similar to this call, where residents get onto a Zoom call and just, we don't have the 4-minute limit. We don't have the structure of speaking up at a board meeting, but we have something like this where residents can ask questions about anything they want, and then they could feed it back to the eight village trustees. We'd like to give that a try, actually.
And I would encourage people to attend their property owners association meetings.
So different topic. This, I believe, refers back to St. Paul's. Why can't the Board of Trustees think about repurposing the building as an income producing facility to be used for events such as wedding, conferences, fitness center, et cetera?
I think there's some limitations on, the use with the parkland designation that would have to be considered, and that'll be one issue to consider, as we go through it. So and you have to consider the surrounding community. If you build a facility like that, what would that do with traffic? How often would the facility, even if you could get the park lane designation dealt with, which I understand would be very difficult. But I think it's an idea. I think we should welcome all ideas. So that person that had that idea, when we start to do the community outreach, I think we should put every idea on the table, and every idea should be considered as far as the pros and the cons. So I'm up for, all suggestions. There's a lot of very smart people in this village, and we should be listening to all their good ideas.
Okay, so the next question is to Yvonne. It's a little long. I'll read the whole thing and then let you comment on that. What explanation did you hear when attending meetings that helped you understand why the Board of Trustees tried to shut out the GC News? And similarly, what explanation did you hear about why the village fighting our handicapped residents over 3 parking spots that made you agree with those decisions? Also, do you recognize that the open meeting laws require these decisions and others should be discussed and made in the BOT meetings, not just the reasons communicated later?
I'd start by saying, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
That the Board of Trustees do talk about these decisions, at the meetings. I'm not sure where somebody said that I agreed with what they did. I think when you look at, I wasn't involved in these decisions. All I know is that at the end of the day, the Garden City News and the Garden City Life were designated the 2 official papers of Garden City. I don't think not having one paper or the other designated as official has that much of impact. That the paper is still going to exist, still going to put articles in. It just means that the village doesn't post certain notices through it. What were the other questions?
I believe the second part of the question asks, do you recognize that open meeting laws require these decisions and others should be discussed and made in BOT meetings, not just the reasons communicated later? I believe it's implying that these decisions were not made at open BOT meetings.
I believe these decisions were made at open BOT meetings.
Okay.
And I think, the 3 trustees will be on the call Thursday, and they could, and they put articles in the Garden City News. There was one specific article that just talked about the 3 trustees' positions on the open meeting laws and why they felt that there weren't, in their opinion, being on the board, why they felt that there were no violations. And I think that would be a good question to ask the 3 trustees, just to reiterate what they put into that article. Everything that the trustees, and 2 weeks ago, the 3 trustees tried to list out their backgrounds on certain decisions that were made, including the one about the handicap parking, and just to lay out what transpired. And I know that was in writing, and it was, maybe they can add to it or, provide some further details as far as what their thought process was and how they ended up, in that situation. So I think that might be, a good follow-up for Thursday's call. And again, Yvonne and I don't have not sitting on the board. It's hard for us to have the full picture of everything that was discussed and how they made the decisions.
What are your thoughts on implementing curbside cardboard recycling?
I like the idea. I throw out a lot of cardboard. I know you can go to the village dump. They have a place where you can put your cardboard. Maybe I should do that now that I'm retired. I could probably load up the car. But I do think we should find a way to make it easier for residents to recycle cardboard, because especially with COVID and Amazon's bigger than ever now, there's a lot of cardboard out there. So I'm a fan of that idea.
I like that idea too. So it's something to look into further.
Okay. And as I said, I'm sort of going in a little bit more order now than we were before. As far as the third track, it's also the opinion of many residents that it has gone very well, aside from the polls. The safety issue of not having a street crossing, quality of life with no horns blowing, and the wall has improved the aesthetic. Don't you agree that suing the MTA Long Island Railroad is just another pointless lawsuit that will not only cost us lots of money, but also cost us any leverage we had with the MTA, like landscaping? In the end, they are not moving the poles. So I guess the question is, well, anyway, you know the question.
Yeah, I I don't know, I would just say, look, at this point, the decision was made by the board to, file this lawsuit. I think Yvonne and I have to be brought up to speed with the attorney as far as what he's done so far and what his team has done. And, I think as trustees, we will consider, what the case is. And, no one wants to spend endless amounts on litigation that is nothing's going to come out of it. That would be imprudent of any board or village trustee to spend money if there's no possibility of success. And no one would do that. But I think at this point, we have to sit down with the lawyers to figure out where exactly we stand. And we'll try to make the most prudent decision as we can based on all the facts that we have.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to agree with Rich. I don't think either of us wants to be in a position where we're putting the village at a financial, strain or situation because of this lawsuit. So I think we need to be prudent about it going forward as well.
Okay. And Yvonne, I want to come back to, I got a little bit more explanation on the question that I had asked you previously that I wasn't quite clear on myself. So thanks for the clarification. The question was not about just resolving the monster poles issue in Garden City's favor, but that not every issue can be anticipated. And when a significant issue arises, it should be totally pursued, regardless of whether the BOT thinks the issue can be resolved in Garden City's favor. So that's just clarification on what the question meant.
Yes, and I agree. Not every issue can be anticipated, and you do have to try your best. That's all.
Okay. St. Paul's question: will you insist upon a resident referendum on St. Paul's and not have 8 people decide the fate of it?
Yes.
Yes, I think all 5 of us are of that opinion, that there should be a referendum once we come up with a good idea that we believe. We would hope that we come up with a really great idea, it will pass, but that's up to the residents.
And a similar, related, I should say, question on St. Paul's: do you support keeping St. Paul's to remain parkland?
I think it would, obviously if it's parkland and it sounds good. I think we have to hear all the ideas from the residents. I hear it's difficult to get that reversed. That would have to be an issue that will have to be discussed with attorneys and the like. But I don't think we should be precluded in opening up ideas because it's parkland, but it probably does cause some limitations as far as what we can and can't do with St. Paul's. I would prefer something that was, useful for all the residents, that residents have value as opposed to a commercial activity there. I mean, I guess you could find someone to, save the building and put a hospital, not a hospital, or an ambulatory surgery center there, but I'm not sure if the residents would want that. I think they would want something that the community could use, is my opinion, but I'm open to any ideas that residents have as we get into the next phase of this, that's soliciting feedback.
Yeah, I think that we can consider all options, and that we shouldn't close the door on anything. I think we almost have to think out of the box a little bit on this and try to see what will be best and what the cost is and how to balance those and how to put something in that all residents are going to be happy about.
Okay. Can the Board of Trustees have a routine column in the Garden City News as a way to inform a wide percent of residents?
The mayor has her column currently, but adding more information to that or additional board of trustees, that I think is a good idea
Yeah.
to look into.
Yeah, I agree. The mayor's column, I guess, is very detailed. It's kind of a good synopsis of what's going on. But, one thing I would love to have on our website is that, just you go on the website, if you're interested in St. Paul's, you don't click on St. Paul's and see 25 different files for St. Paul's. You click on St. Paul's and you see a nice crisp summary of exactly where we stand, what the next steps are, when the next meeting is. I think that's the type of information that we can incorporate in the website to make it very simple for people to know everything. Like, what's the status of the Edgemere Firehouse? Here's a couple of paragraphs of where we are and what the next steps are. I think we can do that with a lot of the issues in the village.
Okay, we're going to go back to water for a moment. In the village flyer that was sent out on the drinking water, it stated that our water is currently in violation of the New York State MCL standards, but it didn't provide any metric. The New York State MCL standard for I-4-dioxin is 1 ppt, I'll say, and 10 ppb for PFOS and PFOL. What were the levels of our water samples for these 3 contaminants?
That's a very specific question as far as where we are now. Our water, I do encourage 2 things. There was additional information put on the village website that talks about, is our water safe? That was in response to a lot of feedback that the village board got about the water. So I encourage every resident, everybody on this call, to please go to the village website and read that. I think you'll find it very informative. The other thing I would recommend is, there was, at the last board meeting, Mr. Swazi went into some detail about everything that the village is doing in regard to the water. I would encourage you to listen to the parts of the, and up front it was discussed. I think Mr. Trustee Dorney spoke about it, and then Ralph Swazi spoke about it as well. I think those were very informative for me. That's a very specific question about what the dioxin level is currently, but I think it's very helpful for you to listen to that as well as to read what just got put on the village website. And I think that might be going out, when on the website, might be going out to the residents as a flyer, I believe. You might receive something in the mail shortly, I believe.
And a related question, when will the 2020 annual water quality report be distributed?
That's a very specific question as well. That's probably something that should be addressed to Mr. Swazi or.
Right, and we'll find that out. We'll post that on the website. That comes out
out
every year. For some reason, I'm going to say April, but do not quote me on that.
Yeah.
We'll post that on the website.
It comes out in the spring, but
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. The questions are. So Yvonne, I think this relates to the conversation we had a little earlier about Board of Trustees decisions and open meetings, meeting laws, et cetera. The question says, if those decisions were deliberated in public at BOT meetings, then why is it necessary to provide explanations in letters to the GC News after the fact?
well, clearly there are a lot of people who are not attending board meetings and not getting the information. So you have to find an alternative in how to get the information out to people and make sure that they are getting the correct facts.
Okay. Rich, this is directed to you. You're an accountant, so you understand cost benefit analysis. What is the number that you might calculate in real estate damage to homeowners by the monster poles?
I think that is a very difficult question. There are not that many, as you know, there's not that many home sales overall in Garden City. It would take a statistical analysis over the next year or so, if not longer, to figure out what the impact is from the monster poles. You have to look at how much do the housing prices rise in other parts of Garden City versus how much do the housing prices potentially rose in the estate, in that section of the estates that can see the poles. I think as an accountant, that analysis is probably doable, but you need data. You need a lot of sales data to come up with some information. So I think it's doable, but I'm not sure at this point, given the volume of house sales in the village, how easy it would be to do the analysis. But I think the analysis probably could be done over time. I think intuitively, some people would say it's impossible. You can ask a real estate agent, but it probably is going to be a very subjective assessment as what the impact is. But something to look at down the road as far as trying to assess what the impact is.
So I'm going to summarize a few questions that are related. We'll go back to the fire department questions, firehouse, I should say, questions as well as fire department. One question states, if there were only 3 to 4 fires a year, then why do we need a $10 million firehouse? Do you have a view on how the volunteer fire department performed in the village's most recent fire on Hilton? Do you think the Board of Trustees spending $342,000 for PCAD on the Edgemere Firehouse was a good idea? I think those are, oh wait, there was one long fire question. I lost it.
Okay. Well, I think the board has already
yeah, those are the kinds of questions, yes.
Yeah, the board has already made the decision on PKAD. So I think that, if we're elected to the board, that then Rich and I would have to, to take the firehouse to the next step. That we would need to look at what PKAD comes back with. We would need to, do an analysis to see if it's the right thing for the village, get input from people who live in the area. There's several houses that are right across the street from the firehouse. I would, certainly want to hear what they have to say about the proposal that comes back, that this firehouse is going to be right across the street from them, to see what they have to look at. And then we would move that process along in the way we felt was, appropriate after hearing from the residents and seeing what the proposal is. I said something about 10 million. There's no decision made to move forward on a firehouse yet. And then there was another question in there.
I'll just add that I don't, as far as 3 to 4 fires, that's what I've been told, as far as the number of fires in the village. I think an assessment as far as, what we need to do at Edgemere, obviously the safety of, and there may be 3 or 4 fires, but our volunteer firefighters answer to 1,000+ calls a year. They're a very active volunteer firefighting group. They do a tremendous amount of work for the village and responding to hundreds and if not over 1,000 emergencies every single year. As far as the need for the Edgemere Firehouse itself, whether it be a renovation of the existing firehouse or whether it be a new firehouse, that's something Yvonne and I will have to get debriefed on as far as if elected, as far as what the pros and cons of each of those proposals are. And so we can make an informed decision as far as what should we do going forward with that fire station number 2.
This is a communication question and similar to some of the things you said, but an interesting suggestion. There was a letter to the editor titled, quote, questions about water notice that listed a number of good questions that should be answered. Do you support the BOT and the mayor putting out a Q&A notice to address these types of questions?
This is all very new as far as the water information. There was the required notice that came out because the village did get the deferral to May 22nd. And that notice, by the way, as Mr. Swazi said, it was guided by the Department of Health as far as what the content in that notice was. And also the village has now put out 2 publications, the one we first got in the mail and plus another publication that you'll receive shortly. But if you want to receive it now, you can go onto the website. I think it's a good question. If we start to get a lot of questions still coming in, I think it might be worthwhile. The next step would be an FAQ perhaps on the website and maybe to summarize some of these questions that people have. That's something I think should be explored by the administration as well as the Board of Trustees.
Yeah, I'll just, agree with Rich. I think that if residents have questions, that the Board of Trustees should try to make sure that they're all answered to the residents' satisfaction.
Okay. So I think we're pretty close to wrap up. There are 2 questions that are somewhat related. I'll summarize them, which is really about if you were to become a trustee, what would that look like and how you would handle that going forward. So if after the election, either or both of you find yourself newly elected, along with members of FABGC, including a new mayor, how do you anticipate the transition? And the second question is, what platform are you both running on? FABGC sent out a mailer a few weeks ago that pinpointed what and why they were running. And how do you stand out from the current board and make me vote against party lines? So what is your platform? And if you were to win, what would your transition be like? And how would you work with, if it were the circumstance, work with candidates from FABGC?
I would say, we don't have it, we were all selected by our individual property owners association. So we're not running as we say we are a party, but that's just by tradition in Garden City. The community agreement candidates that come out of the POA system are called the community agreement party. So we don't necessarily have a platform. I personally put a letter in the editor to the Garden City News that you can search my name, Catalano, and you can see basically what I want to accomplish as a trustee. It's not exactly a platform, but it's the issues that are most important to me. So you can see my first one was on the water and what I want to accomplish there. I have comments about St. Paul's, and you can read that. And I'm sure Yvonne, I'll let her speak about her positions. And then as far as working with FABGC candidates, if they get selected, I think it's an election. Obviously the two of us hope that you vote for the community agreement party candidates. I think we have, really strong candidates who have a lot of great experience. Mr. Bolbrook has 8 years, Steve Macrino, 6, Mark Heyer, 4. Mark brings a lot of, public safety experience that no one else on the board has, for example. So but if they're FABGC candidates are selected and we do have, a different mayor from FABGC, I'm sure Yvonne and I will work with anyone. At the end of the day, we're residents together, we're neighbors, we see these people, at church, on the ball fields. Of course, we'll work together if that's the will of the people, and that's what the voters decide on March 16th, which is actually, the polls will be closing 2 weeks from today. So this thing is almost over, by the way. So.
Just at this time. Sure. Thanks, Rich. I think there are just a couple things that I was hoping to bring to the board. Certainly, I want to represent all the residents. I'm not, tied to any specific group. I want to make sure that I listen to everybody. I think that's a skill that I have that maybe would be well served on the board. I think, a little more explanation at board meetings, perhaps in my thought process, how I've come to decisions would be helpful for residents, because I do think that we've gotten to where we are today because maybe we could be doing a little better on the communication side. But, I have a strong financial background, and I'm hoping that that helps as we review any decision that's going to impact residents financially. We try to keep our tax rate going up moderately under the 2%. I know there are a lot of people on fixed incomes in the village. So I think, just want to be sensitive to all residents, and I hope that listening to Rich and I today, people realize that we're two people who just want to do the best thing for the village, and we're really here to work for you.
Great. So thanks everybody for calling. We certainly went a little longer than anticipated, but great questions. So appreciate that. Some really interesting conversation. As a reminder for any who are interested, on Thursday evening at 7:30 as well, we will have the sitting trustees who are also running as part of the community agreement party. Bob Bolbrook, Mark Heyer, and Steve Macrinos will be here to answer your questions. And next week, we'll have all 5 candidates together to continue the conversation. So thanks to everybody and have a great night.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy.
Bye-bye.
Judy.